You're listening to TMI for the week of December 10th, 2018.
Kevin Hart is not going to do the Oscars now.
So, what's the background on that, and is this a good thing?
I wish you hadn't asked me that, and I wish you knew more about it than I did. But,
Wolf, are you there?
Well, Wolf.
Did he just drop the mic? Where did he go?
He's tweeted something. Somebody's dug up his tweets from 10 years ago.
Uh-oh.
Maybe he hasn't apologized enough. And then there was speculation that he would just weather it because comedians used to be tough. That was their whole thing, was being the last bastion of freedom of speech. And whether the Oscars have said no or Kevin backed out, I don't know. Notice I'm on a first name basis.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, so
the ghost of Christmas past.
Somebody's got to Google that.
Yeah.
French protests.
It sounds like they fizzled out. I had heard this morning that only 1,500 showed up, and there's like 8,000 cops.
Okay.
I don't know what the update is as of our recording right now, but
maybe they're, that's a bit fake newsy from what I heard this morning.
Okay.
Makes you wonder if they don't want it to spread the way Rodney King protests spread to every city in the world. But
yeah.
I heard, maybe I got my days wrong or fake news,
He
but
showed up
90,000 cops were deployed last night and 700 arrested.
Oh, wow. Okay, I didn't hear that.
So
I heard the 90,000, but I wasn't aware that 700 had been arrested. Well, I'm glad I'm not one of those 700.
And I think they were showing pictures last night of probably the previous night where they had somebody caught, all the arrestees sitting handcuffed with cops all standing around them and that kind of Bloor and Spadina G20 protest kind of.
Well, that was martial law had been declared, and at that point, and I got into a major debate with somebody about that because they said martial law had never been declared in Canada, and it's like you just walked into the spider's web. And so, that's one of those few times where it's been declared, and nobody knew except for the authorities and the Premier, Dalton McGuinty. So, and I think Harper as well. But,
I'm sorry. How does Dalton McGuinty and Harper fit in?
Dalton McGuinty. Well, to declare martial law, you have to have the Prime Ministers and the Premier of the province's permission to do that.
What example of martial law are you thinking? What year is this?
This is 2010 during the G20 riots at Spadina. And
why didn't I know that martial law had been declared?
Again, it's one of those things that authorities do, and you only find out afterwards when somebody like the Toronto Star or the CBC break the story.
Isn't the whole point of declaring martial law that you tell somebody?
Well, when we had the shootings up here in Ottawa on Parliament Hill in 2014, in October 2014, I wasn't aware that we were under orders not to go out. I mean, I came back in, and then I went back out, and I was with my clients on Rideau Street, just 100 or 200 meters from the shooting. And it was deserted, except for the police with the machine guns and the military. And nobody told us to go inside to the Rideau Center. I mean, everything was locked down, and everybody was locked in place. So, and then they shut down the cell phone towers and all cell communications. So I had no idea. It wasn't until later that evening, around 9 o'clock that night.
What was that term they were using when? Lockdown.
Lockdown, yeah.
I've said a few times, I hope to God I'm never in a situation where I'm locked down. Like, I believed my grandfathers when there was freedom and stuff. I'm not of this generation that's going to be locked down. Like, I would rather die at the hands of terrorists than be, quote, locked down by a nanny state. That just makes my blood boil.
Welcome to 2018. Welcome to the 21st century.
Well, I thought the martial law example in Canada was 1970s October crisis.
Yeah, correct. Yep.
But apparently there's examples of...
Welcome to the party, and you didn't even realize you were part of it, and you were there.
So if what you say is true, then it seems to be a big habit of Canadians to declare martial law when the going gets a little tough.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like it. Weird story in the New York Times. The photo was of an ant. And then upon further investigation, the photo was of a spider.
Okay.
That so exactly looks like an ant, it's not funny. And it holds its two front legs up to pretend they're antennae. So it is some crazy species. And the interesting thing about this weird spider, and you can just go to the New York Times and read it.
Spider ant.
It's one of the only non-mammals that gives a milk to its young. So this spider is a freak show of a spider, and it looks exactly like an ant.
Did a spider and an ant get together one night at an insect party and copulate? Like, how did this cross-species emerge? Or is this something...
It's not a cross-species. I mean, the thing has 8
Chinese,
legs. It's a spider.
Chinese lab where they're, like, genetically engineering children now in China?
No, it's just found that it's advantageous to look like an ant sometimes.
That's interesting. Yeah. And what other species? No other species has done this?
Oh, lots of species mimic other species.
Oh, well, yeah.
Yeah, but the weird thing about this thing is that it feeds its young. There's something particularly... I mean, usually you feed your young when your young are vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if looking like an ant makes them more vulnerable when they're young, but anyway, so there's a need for the mother to support them well into their young adult life. They're still hanging around the nest at like 24 and 26. If you want your kids to leave home, stop cooking with cheese.
Yeah, stop feeding them. Exactly. Well, that's interesting. Well, I got to check that article out. Okay. Yeah.
So there's another bug article in the New York Times.
Okay.
This is in the, I think, New York Times Magazine, so it's a really long article.
Okay.
This one is Insect Apocalypse.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Insect Apocalypse is here. And I'm not going to go into a big detail on it, but the basic idea is they cited, certain bees in certain areas and certain particular bugs, the butterfly population, and a few other examples where the reduction in population is in the 80 and 90%. But they're saying overall, across all species of insects, they're down 45%.
Holy mackerel.
We always thought there was this, canary in a coal mine.
Like the bees dying.
Well, not everybody was convinced about the seriousness and cause of all that. But now that you see it across all these species,
right?
And again, this article goes into extreme depth, page after page after page. So it is kind of interesting and alarming, but apparently I thought it was interesting that... And I noticed this when I would hear when I was a kid, the forests used to be denser. When you drove through Maine, it was totally different. I mean, hearing it from older people that it was a noticeable difference in the canopy or the overall biodiversity. And I thought, well, that's interesting because I wouldn't notice that. And that's what this article gets into is that, and talks for quite a bit about how each generation just accepts what they find as the norm.
Or the new normal.
We don't know how to compare it.
Okay.
And so it's interesting. And I mean, nobody likes bugs, let's say. There's a few nice ones. But for people who put all this effort into bird feeders and all that, it's just interesting to note they're feeding the birds not because they like them and want to attract them. They're feeding the birds because all of the bugs are dead. And if you've got a nice backyard and feeding the birds in an urban area, the bugs have been gone since the 40s.
Well, yeah. It's true. I mean, I don't see monarch butterflies as often as I had used to. A lot of...
Is that 45% drop, or I think it could be 80%. Again, read the article for the details. But
are they saying
talked about the drop of monarch butterflies.
Yeah, because they used to be so prolific, I seem to recall when I was younger. And And we're just on the confluence of three rivers here, and there's a lot of green space, but you just don't see a lot of,
Well, an
you know.
anti-nuclear activist like myself would be saying, well, we continue to pump all these chemicals into
Mm,
the air, and then we can't figure out why there's population drops
hmm
or mutation or what.
Well, didn't they say for instance, if the bee, I think it was the bee population, it was neonicotinoids
Yeah,
that was killing that
yeah,
population,
but
and was that associated? Did that article mention anything like that with regards to any of the other species, or was it just specifically to the bees, neonicotinoids, or was it Roundup, or any of those type of chemicals?
that is being suspected for the overall insect population drop. I
Yeah,
don't
yeah.
think it poses any theories. It just points out
Uh,
that there's some statistical indicator that's alarming and study needs
okay.
to be done.
Yeah. Well, we're going to we're going to yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, Wolf,
It
just
just
to
makes
cheer
it.
you up, uh,
Yeah. Merry Christmas. Uh,
under the Trump administration,
Pass the crushed glass, please.
all balls to the wall, drilling in
Uh,
wildlife refugee in wild in wildlife refuge. Oh my God.
Wildlife refuges are in these areas because of wetlands that are crucial for wildlife migration.
Since Trump took over, all the limits have been taken off drilling in wildlife sanctuaries now in Alaska.
Oh gosh.
Drill, baby, drill. So it's like Sarah Palin.
Yeah.
We don't hear much about her these days. What is that? She disappeared.
Oh,
Shouldn't she
yeah.
be running with Trump in the 2020?
Uh,
Just, okay.
dystopian future. Oh, there we go.
I don't know. Might be more fun.
Screenplay by Dave Archer.
Might be more fun than Mike Pence. He's a bit of a downer.
Well,
What's okay? How about Pence? Has anyone kept a lower profile, taken responsibility for none of this?
well, he's playing it smart, I guess. I mean, he's just trying to stay out of the spotlight. And I mean, I heard a rumor this week that John Kelly was going to resign. He was just fed up.
Hmm.
So, it seems like when you stick your neck out on the line, it's a it's like the French Revolution. You're going to get it cut off at some point. Trump's going to be waving his Saudi sword, and off with their heads.
Another New York Times story. An Indian call center raided.
Okay.
Again, the article goes into great depth talking about the number of these places, the number of people in India employed, and that they're not all criminals, but for all of us who've had those calls from Windows Security Center.
I've
Or,
had fun with those guys, man.
so do take me off your call list.
Yeah.
However, the other one, the one that calls from the CRA.
Oh, I've never received those.
Oh,
Thank
that's
God.
huge in Toronto. Everyone I've spoken to has had a call from the CRA several
Okay.
times. There's even the ads, the tax collector ads. Have you got a call from? But right there, they never call you.
Okay.
They send you letters. They don't call you, the CRA. So
Yeah.
you know
No.
right
Yeah.
away
Yeah.
it's a scam if you're getting a
Okay.
call. But I've had a few of them, and I could be in some trouble. But actually, I had a weird voicemail. I think I played it at one of the episodes. This crazy guy saying that I would be arrested and I would be this and that, and he sounded like a lawyer, and anyway. But it was. You Google the phone number, and there's thousands of people who've gotten the same call. So,
Oh.
but
Hey,
anyway,
man, don't
this
worry.
call center in India raided. And it was these very ones that do that Windows security. And I haven't gotten a Windows security phone call in a few days.
Okay.
So I wonder if
That's
they
wild.
got those guys, because I keep talking to them about looking for more meaningful work and how does it feel committing fraud, and then a description of the definition of fraud. And they don't, usually they hang up by then, but
I've been taken into the matrix myself. I've rolled over like a fat cat and just
Really?
like, okay, fine.
I'm surprised to
Yeah.
hear that.
Yeah, I'm tired of trying to be the canary in the coal mine. So I'm embracing technology now.
Oh, look at you.
Well, you have my information. I can't do anything about it now. So, and now we're doing this podcast and I'm equally screwed. So,
It's ironic.
well, I mean, it's weird because I just saw something in the last couple of weeks about what is now reality in the 21st century and how they can take. I mean, I have a cover over the lens of the laptop, right?
Yeah.
Because you just don't know whether or not, But I mean, it's just, I just Bob Woodward. I saw an interview with Bob Woodward just recently, and he had it over his Apple computer. He had a piece of paper over the lens, and so I'm like, oh, and if Woodward's doing it, then I'm doing it.
Whatever.
But my point being,
I've received calls on my iPhone that were FaceTime, and I don't know if this happened, but if you've got no underwear on and you walk over and bend over and click answer, and you're new to FaceTime, it might not be your face.
yeah, it's not your face, yeah. But no, where I was going with
Looks
that
a
is
lot
that
like it.
yeah, is that they can now take snippets of your audio, of your voice, and they can string together a
I can do
sentence
that.
that you've never said. Yeah, which is really spooky.
Okay, hold it.
and
Say this. Wrong. I am.
why
Say am.
am
I.
I
Wrong.
wrong?
It's going to be funny. Okay.
Oh no! I didn't click accept, man.
I was hoping for you to upload that file, but
Oh, well,
audio file for the podcast.
Well, there we go.
Okay, President Rodrigo Duarte of the Philippines,
Yes.
and there were photos of jail cells with drug users. Tiny jail cell stacked to the ceiling, them on top of each other. So apparently he joked the other day. He joked the other day about using marijuana, but the punchline appeared to be lost on the nation where thousands of people have been killed in his anti-drug campaign.
Okay, let's back up in time 30 seconds here. Duarte was joking about marijuana?
Yeah.
In what's the context? Joking about using it?
Dude, I read
or
part of one story where...
yeah,
That's
but
a tweet, man.
Okay, I mean, it's just an early April Fool's joke. I mean, what's the
He was in
context?
some speech and he made a joke about using marijuana. He probably said, "Oh, it was, it was like I was high or something."
Oh, I didn't hear that. Okay, using
marijuana. And the punchline appeared to be lost on a nation where thousands of people have been killed in his anti-drug campaign.
Okay.
Just a bit of a freak
Do as
show.
I say, not as I do.
Well,
Okay.
it's just interesting.
Wow.
But
okay.
that's sort of the way it always was, even in the West.
Yeah.
As everybody was talking about it, but then it's your duty to haul the person to jail and add them to the 60 million behind bars.
Oh yeah. Okay. Wow. Okay. That's wow. Okay. Got broadsided with that. Jesus. Okay. Wow. Okay. Well, Wolf, is there anything else you wanna?
Back to you, Wolf.
Well, yes. Okay. Well, okay. Perception news, crazy stuff this week. Let me just reach over here and grab something. I love the photograph from earlier this week from Argentina and the NAFTA 2.0 deal being signed. And you had the Mexican president, Enrique Nieto holding up the agreement, Donald Trump holding up the agreement, and Trudeau, well, he's just sitting there with the agreement flat on the table. And the the advisors of Trump and I guess it's Chrystia Freeland sitting behind him or standing behind him, and Freeland's looking, what? Why isn't he? It's not open. It's like flat on the table, and Trump's advisors looking over, and I think the video that I saw, he's tapping Freeland on the shoulder, and I think he was like intonating that why doesn't Trudeau have the document open for the press to see?
Mm-hmm.
So what's being said and what's not being said, and I just thought that to be a really interesting picture. So what do you think's behind that? What's your guess?
Well, Trump has said a lot about Freeland
Mm-hmm.
and Trudeau.
Okay.
I mean, I think it's the same at funerals.
Mm-hmm.
People are keeping them at arm's length.
Oh, talk about, oh man. I mean, funerals are down, they're a sad event and everything, but Trump and his wife, man, when everybody was standing and doing, what was it, the eulogy or the prayer? I can't remember what it was. Everybody was saying it except for Trump and his wife, and he was just scowling. And I didn't talk about uncouth, thuggish behavior. I didn't think I could be any more surprised. I thought a funeral was a sacred place, and you just behave accordingly. And his arms crossed like a petulant child, and I was blown away. Definitely blown away.
If you worded carefully a questionnaire in all of these giant stores like Starbucks or whatever, just a carefully worded question, should we be playing Christmas music from the minute the doors open to the minute the doors close? Till the minute the doors close. How would people answer that?
Mm-hmm.
How many people would feel sorry for the workers? How many people are Muslims or Hindus? Like,
yeah.
Shouldn't they ask us? And what would we say?
That's a good question. I don't know how to answer that. Okay. I mean, on the one hand, from the corporate point of view, we can do what we want. But on the other hand, you're in the business of serving people, and
I'm avoiding large stores and anything TV commercially with a little bit of effort this Christmas.
Yeah.
Do you think I haven't heard these songs before?
Yeah, I usually have my headphones on and I try to scamper through wherever it's a Christmas thing and not look up. So, I'm usually in my own little world. Yeah.
Another headline. This is more of a tweet, so don't ask too many questions. Earlier today, the Russian news agency announced that the military has begun to deploy Paris-VAT, a bona fide laser cannon.
Okay.
And then later it says the U.S. military has been developing laser weaponry for years.
Okay.
But lasers. And it's not, don't be fooled. A bona fide laser cannon makes it sound like they're using a laser to shoot an ordnance. No, it's a frickin' laser.
So, shooting down satellites,
they claim
aircraft?
That it'll be for specifically satellites and drones.
Underwater applications, submarines?
No, that's not going to work underwater.
It's a high-intensity beam. Focused.
No.
Oh. Yeah, well, I mean, we already have the microwave weapons that nobody's talking about. Right. That's being aimed at our diplomats and their families. So, in Cuba. So, I mean, nobody's talking about it, but it seems to be happening. So,
But lasers.
Okay, lasers.
Here's a stupid line.
Okay.
just after watching all the funerals and everybody's heart goes out here and heart goes out and all our hearts go out. And then I thought, my heart goes out to the cardiac surgeons.
Well, yeah. Speaking of which, cardiac surgeons. I don't know if you caught the headline this week, but apparently Khashoggi's friend, a Canadian Saudi activist who lives in Canada, is suing an Israeli cybersecurity firm, alleging that the Saudi government used the firm's spyware to hack his cell phone and access conversations that he and Jamal Khashoggi had had. And at one point, the Saudi embassy around the corner from my place invited him to come up from Montreal to have a conversation about this. And it was the Citizen Lab at the University of Toronto that let him know that his phone had been hacked because they were running programs or something like this. I don't know the real backstory on that, but it pinged and it showed that this guy had it. It pinged his IP address, I guess, in Montreal. And so they informed him that this is going on. And the software is called Pegasus. And apparently this Israeli firm sold it to the Saudis.
It'd be funny if we put one of the swear word tones over you.
Well, the software firm is, what are they called? They're saying that they had no dealings with the Saudis at all. And it's called the NSO Group. They're saying it's baseless. So,
wow, they just gave me a free phone. It says NSO right on it.
Well,
okay.
Well, there you go. Uncomfortable silence. Cue the crickets.
Oh, well, that reminds me of that Czech who, entering into Canada, the Americans arrested.
Oh, the CFO well, apparently they summoned in Beijing our ambassador today. So
okay, so where is she now? Because we just let Americans come and jump someone who was traveling through our country and hauled her away? Or is this all now the Americans are fighting for custody and extradition? I mean, what is her status?
Her status is incarceration.
In what country?
In Vancouver, here in Canada.
So have we jailed her to protect her from the Americans, or we jailed her on the orders of the Americans, or the Americans came up here and jailed her on our property?
She was transferring planes, from what I understand, at Vancouver International Airport, and it was in that transfer point that she was apprehended at the request of the Americans, because her firm, her family's firm, had been dealing with Iran against the Americans' wishes. The Americans imposed sanctions. And I guess they expect the rest of the world to capitulate to their American exceptionalism. So, anyway.
Well, hang on. Are they legal UN sanctions? And if so, Canada's obligated to play along.
Well, okay, yeah, if they're UN sanctions. But I don't know. That I haven't heard, whether they're UN sanctions or just American sanctions.
Interesting.
So apparently she set up, because they're saying her specifically set up a shell company to do business with Iran. And I guess being the CFO, I guess if you're going to set up a shell company within your company, you have to have all knowledge. Yeah. I don't know how this stuff works.
Yeah. Well,
but if she's found guilty,
trying to hide it then.
Yeah. So apparently, if she's found guilty, it's 30 years in prison. So
in what country?
The United States.
If extradited.
Well, the question here I have, if it's one of the biggest telecommunication companies in the world, and it's the daughter of the founder, why wasn't she flying in a private Lear jet or something like that? Like, why would you, if you're avoiding the United States?
Why would you have to do business with Iran anyway? If you were that funky,
I mean, that's a different question entirely. But I don't know why she wasn't flying in a private aircraft.
So just want to say, when there is a benefit to misrepresentation, that's fraud, no?
Yep.
The list of characters, and I'll just list through them. George Papadopoulos, who I think was released from his short jail sentence on Friday.
Okay.
is it the Maria Butina? Butina,
Mm-hmm.
the Russian spy.
Mm-hmm.
Her lawyers were having a conference call on what to do with her.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody suggested maybe she'll be traded for spies with Russia. Apparently the Russians are very interested in what happens to her. It's ironic for a country that doesn't seem to be big on civil liberties, but whatever. So just names. Paul Erickson,
Okay.
target of a letter now from the Mueller investigation for being an agent of a foreign power. No big deal. Rick Gates, Roger Stone, Jerome Corsi, Cohen, Manafort, Flynn. I mean, it's a hell of a list. All associated with Trump.
A baker's dozen almost.
Pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Then recently, Nikki Haley is out, and now a Fox personality will be the ambassador to UN.
Only in America.
Whatever happened to the inauguration funding scandal? Remember there was all that controversy about how many people showed up.
Yeah.
The largest inauguration in history was Obama's. By funding, it was $50 million. Apparently, Trump spent over $100 million. $25 million went to Melania's best friend. But remember, there was talk a year ago about Russian oligarchs possibly having donated to fund the inauguration. I think that's going to come back up.
Well, 100 years from now, historians will be able to definitively say what went on, but us stay tuned.
We learned through the week, Manafort, well, we learned this a long time ago, but just reinforced through the week by court filings, the extent to which Manafort was acting on behalf of Ukraine. Flynn being charged in Virginia for illegally lobbying for Turkey. Cohen's papers in August, remember, Trump was called an unindicted co-conspirator because they arranged to make payments to McDougal and Stormy Daniels, which was a campaign finance violation. But by Friday of this week, in another filing by the Mueller investigation, it turns out Cohen pleaded guilty to lying to Congress about how long negotiations for the Moscow Tower went on. And so he did that on behalf of and coordinated with Trump. He even circulated his speech beforehand to all the family members, and everybody was on the same page and testified in kind. So, yes, Trump has been named in a felony, but now he has been named as committing a federal crime by a special prosecutor in a court filing on Friday. So that, the last two times that ever happened in the history of man, was Watergate and the Clinton impeachment. So even though a lot of people say, oh, nothing ever seems to happen, this thing's taking forever, nobody's ever going to get charged, he won't wear an orange jumpsuit. Well, there's only been two other times where in a court filing by the special prosecutor, the president was named as having committed a federal crime. So that's historic on Friday.
Well, I noticed at the funeral that they didn't shake hands.
Who?
Trump and Clinton. Yeah, Clinton looked at him and just kind of gave him kind of like,
Would you shake hands with him? Lock her up?
No.
Your
man.
wife?
You're going after my wife?
Your wife?
I'm sorry, man. No. Yeah, no.
So I can't stand this cliffhanger. This Mueller thing's driving me crazy. So I'm saying, Russia, if you are listening.
Oh, no. If our line goes down, we know they're listening. When Putin met with MBS and they gave each other this tough guy kind of hand grab and, pat on the back and everything. And then a couple of days later, we find out that the Saudis and Russia have dropped oil production to raise up prices and what have you. It's just all too coincidental, 8 years ago when the oil prices started sliding, or whenever it was when OPEC decided to cut production to raise oil prices, and then that's when our oil fields started feeling the same effect. So the Saudis have never been a friend of ours. I mean, they've always gone against the grain with everything. But, money talks, BS walks. So whether it be Russia, China, Saudi Arabia, I mean, I don't think we should be surprised, and then things play out the way they do down in the States with Trump.
Well, a little Trump line here.
Mm.
We need to impeach so another administration could get underway, like the Hiltons or the Marriotts.
Oh, no. That's almost as ridiculous as, hey, I'm a tariff man.
Hey, but we only elect
Yeah. No,
hotel
I hear it.
owners, and then we sell rooms to the other politicians.
Well, speaking of selling hotel rooms, good segue. I think the Saudis bought how many rooms at Trump Hotel in Washington, D.C.?
They've done that a few times. There's a few stories of that have come over the months, but you're talking about the veterans,
the latest
I
one.
think.
Yeah, the veterans, for lobbying for pro-Saudi Arabia. Didn't the Washington Post just break that story Wednesday, I think? And so I haven't heard anything else about that since then.
Manufacture consent for continued war in Yemen, essentially, right?
Yeah, well, it certainly sounds like it. Certainly feels like it, that's for sure.
Clips.
Clip trip. Okay.
So the schedule this week was Tuesday, Flynn's sentencing memo. Okay. And then Friday, Manafort and Cohen's sentencing recommendations. And other tabled documents that are secret. And most of all of those documents are 50% redacted, wherein they're not wanting to impugn ongoing investigations on other parties. So it's not over.
Till it's over.
You'll recall Sally Yates.
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
She was the United States Deputy Attorney General. Mm-hmm. Here's her commenting on retired General Michael Flynn when it became known. Michael Flynn at the time was the National Security Advisor to President Individual Number 1.
State the obvious, you don't want your national security advisor compromised with the Russians.
I heard an interesting term: money, ideology, compromise, and coercion.
Okay.
And ego. It spells mice. Money, ideology, compromise, coercion, and ego.
Yeah, that's true.
This is what intelligence agents, Putin, a trained intelligence agent,
right,
or FBI, CIA, they will look for somebody who's vulnerable to money, to ideology, can be coerced, compromised, and somebody whose weakness is ego. And it's funny, individual one seems to qualify in every area.
All of the above.
To someone like Putin.
Mm-hmm.
This week, at the Bush Sr. funeral, Brian Mulroney got a chance to hear himself. And one of the things he mentioned I thought was interesting, I could have this acronym wrong, CHVU, which apparently Mulroney was pointing out when he visited with Bush Sr. 20 years ago.
Okay.
He had a plaque erected, and it was Ceiling High Visibility Unlimited. And it's an aviator term, a throwback to Bush's
World War II days. Yeah.
As a fighter pilot.
Interesting.
Yeah, that was an interesting mention. So here's journalist John Helleman a day before Trump was seen at the funeral on Wednesday.
It's obviously been galling to him to have been excluded, for instance, from the McCain funeral, which I mentioned earlier. The notion that he's at least going to be allowed to attend this funeral must give him some degree of comfort, although he's not being asked to speak, and I'm sure that is galling to him on another level. I think the president is remarkably unreflective. He's remarkably unintrospective. He's not a person. He's always thinking about himself, but he's not thinking about how other people think about him. He is a classic narcissist, and I mean that in the strict psychoanalytical sense. He has no sense of how people see him. So it's possible that what for any other normal human at this moment would be a remarkably awkward moment, to be seated among other former presidents and all of the heads of state and all of the other grandees who will be in Washington, that he will not be feeling the kinds of things that you and I would be feeling in similar circumstances. It's also possible that, given his state right now of agitation and rage, that regardless of whether he has that sense of reflection, he will still be in a world of hurt, in a world of discomfort as he sits there stewing in the understanding that he's not, and I think he does understand this, that he's not like the rest of them.
Did you see the photo of him sitting during the eulogies?
I mean, if the vibe that he gave off was, it was grotesque. His behavior was grotesque, and I really feel sorry for his grandchildren and for his little guy that's with him at the White House, because I remember as a kid, you know, if people didn't like your dad, man, or your parents, so
The little guy at the White House, you mean Whitaker?
No, I mean his son.
Ga-dum-tsh.
Oh, I walked right into that glass door. Sorry.
Well, here he is at the funeral, but here he is Trump on the bushes.
Okay.
Points of light. I never quite got that one. I'm trying to say, what the hell is that?
Well, I think Bush is probably the worst president in the history of the United States.
Poor Jeb Bush. I mean, this poor guy with this low energy. It's sad. No, it's sad. I came up with that term. It became so defining. It's like having it on his forehead. I am low.
Yeah, isn't he the first sitting president not to speak at a president's funeral?
Well, sounds good to me.
Yeah, I don't recall the last time that happened.
And now, President, individual number one. Republican lobbyist Roger Stone said Monday he will plead the fifth if asked to testify before the Mueller investigation on his good buddy, individual number one. So here's Trump talking about pleading the fifth.
The Fifth Amendment.
When you have your staff taking the Fifth Amendment, taking the fifth, so they're not prosecuted, I think it's disgraceful.
Well, yeah, well, no.
Yeah, so he had some more to say on the fifth.
On a Congress. Fifth Amendment, Fifth Amendment, Fifth Amendment. Horrible. Horrible. The mob takes the fifth. If you're innocent, why are you taking the Fifth Amendment?
When you have your staff taking the Fifth Amendment, taking the fifth, so they're not prosecuted, I think it's disgraceful.
Disgraceful. The Khashoggi controversy has not disappeared or dissipated. The CIA director Gina Haspel did end up, I think she testified before the Senate secretly, but here's Senator Bob Menendez on Khashoggi.
Cool.
Well, I can't get into the specifics of the briefing, but I thought that it was pretty clear that the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia had directed the killing of Jamal Khashoggi prior to this briefing. I am resolute in that belief after the briefing, and this is not a question of who done it. It's a question, I know in my mind who directed this, and that's the Crown Prince. And now the question is, what will we do about it?
Even Republican senators, Lindsey Graham, senator from North Carolina.
Okay.
You have to be willfully blind not to come to the conclusion that this was orchestrated and organized by people under the command of MBS, and that he was intricately involved in the demise of Mr. Khashoggi. Open source reports show that He had been focusing on Mr. Khashoggi for a very long time. It is zero chance, zero, that this happened in such an organized fashion without the Crown Prince.
Wow. Okay. So Lindsey Graham is going right against the president. That's
I
interesting.
think another senator was refusing to vote on new judges until there was some kind of resolution.
Well, the storm clouds are definitely looming on the horizons around the world, and I think this week, from the stock markets losing all their gains this year to what you've just played us, further confirms that 2019 is going to be a tumultuous year for the world as we know it.
Well, Trump has some comment on Khashoggi.
So he strongly denies it. He vehemently denies it. I hate the cover-up. And I will tell you this, the Crown Prince hates it more than I do.
Cover-up?
What?
Hasn't he just said he admits there's a cover-up?
Yeah. It's like... okay. You know...
Jill Wine-Banks, one of the prosecutors in the Watergate case.
Right.
Many of the members of my team concluded that he was indictable, but Leon Jaworski said that impeachment was the politically correct procedure. So that means that if you don't indict and the Office of Legal Counsel is prohibiting it, then you have to follow impeachment as the only way to do justice in this case. And the evidence here is, to me, quite clear that crimes have been committed. So the only question is, do you let him get away with it, or do you try to do some justice either through the criminal system or through the political system, which would be impeachment? And I think we have to address that and take one of those actions, because otherwise someone is above the law, and that is not democracy. So we should take action, and I think that the crimes have been laid out quite clearly.
Trump says no collusion. He says MBS hates the cover-up. And here's Manafort with some reassuring words.
So to be clear, Mr. Trump has no financial relationships with any Russian oligarchs.
That's what he said. I think that's what I said. That's obviously what our position is.
I love his voice. He's got a great voice. Must be telling you too.
Oh, my Lord, yeah. It's definitely reassuring words.
So weird little things are coming out about Manafort. So one of the things was he brokered a deal to have Ecuador extradite Assange.
Yeah, I heard about that.
That's a freak show.
There are so many tentacles to this story. It's just absolutely amazing. Just when you thought you've uncovered, the last bit of ginseng roots, all of a sudden it just splinters off into something else.
One of the things that came up with Cohen was they're now referring to it as Company Number 1. So that's the Trump organization. Had the Moscow deal gone through, they would have made hundreds of millions. It required a direct meeting between individual number 1 and Putin, which kind of makes you wonder what they talked about at Helsinki. If the Russian deal went through, there was lots of money to be made. Negotiations for that were still going on many months into the Trump presidency, not ending, as Cohen had testified and Trump had said was all done and finished with by 2015. The point is that as he's saying that no negotiations after 2015 for the Trump Tower in Moscow, the Russians knew otherwise and knew he was lying. So, I mean, that's one of the most interesting parts of this.
Find us on Twitter at @ThatArcher, our podcast page, tmi.twxnet.com. Rate the show on iTunes. It changes the way the show is listed.
But here's Sarah Huckabee. Here's Hera Huckabee Sanders.
Oh, no.
Huckabee Handers. Sarah Huckabee Handers. That's a good one. Okay. She's knowingly disseminating false information. Fine, we got it. But she publicly said that the Trump Tower meeting was about Russian adoptions.
Russian adoptions?
Yeah. When everybody asks why
baby?
are Russian oligarchs meeting Don Jr. in a Trump Tower in June of 2016,
right?
The answer was it was to talk about Russian child adoptions.
Okay.
Trump said it, Sarah said it, everybody said it.
Oh, because they're just such a warm and compassionate group of people.
Yeah. Like Melania, who cares, on the back of her coat. But
yeah, exactly. They want
is
baby
there
kidneys.
no law that Sarah, who's a government employee, although somebody will probably say she's some kind of exempt political staff, but she's lying to the public. And this is what I said earlier. When you misrepresent the facts for your own gain, is that not fraud? Is there no charge? And I'm just saying, of all the shit she said, telling us that the Trump Tower meeting was about adoptions, there's got to be a law against that. So to distract us from the week, Trump's been on a tweet roll. He's now picked a fight with his former employee, former Secretary of State, Rex Tillerson. Did you catch this?
No, I missed that one. What I did catch this week is illegal house cleaner.
Oh, yeah. Ecuadorian illegal working at their house in New Jersey.
Way to go, Trump. You got a bunch of illegals working for you. Fan-bloody-tastic, eh? But anyway.
Trump's cleaning lady in New Jersey is undocumented.
Mm-hmm.
Another story I saw, 13.3 of 19 billion has been recovered since the Madoff scandal.
Wow. Okay.
In the records, the losses are 65 billion, but that includes illegal profits that he was pretending everybody was making. But the actual deposits were $19 billion that people have filed claims to recover.
Okay.
And
wow.
In the course of suing, apparently, the people who made illegal profits and other people, 13.3 of 19 billion has been recovered for victims of Madoff.
Bernie Madoff just came into my smoky little cranium. Sorry.
So I thought that was a weird story.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
But back to Rex Tillerson.
I wonder how Bernie's doing. Isn't he in a supermax now?
Yeah.
I wonder if he... do you think he's counting polyps?
I think he's warming the bench for Trump, but that's just my...
Well, it's.
So apparently Thursday, at a speech, former Secretary of State Rex Tillerson was giving, in a rare public appearance. He has said, and he mentioned in his speech, that he had to tell repeatedly the president that some of the things he wanted to do were impossible because they were against the law or violated a treaty or whatever. I'd say, here's what we can do, the former Exxon CEO said in a Houston speech. We can go back to Congress and get this law changed, and that's what we can do. There's nothing wrong with that. I think that's about impeaching the president or charging him with crimes while in office. Mr. Tillerson telling the president, a man who is pretty undisciplined doesn't like to read. Mr. Tillerson talking about the president, quote, a man who is pretty undisciplined doesn't like to read, doesn't like briefings, reports, and doesn't like to get into the details of a lot of things.
Wow.
But rather just kind of says, this is what I believe. He also raised some concerns about the state of America. Trump said he's dumb as a rock and lazy as hell.
Trump said that of Tillerson.
Yeah, in a tweet. Dumb as a rock and lazy as hell.
the laws of unintended consequences. And so, example, YouTube, the program for YouTube was designed, 15, 20 years ago by a bunch of university students. And then, the unintended consequence was a 5-year-old making $22 million a year for just playing with toys. His life is basically, set for him, in the United States, his college fund, everything else like that. So the law of unintended consequences, what happens in 20 years when we have, or 10 years when we have smart cars on the roads, and how are we going to, 100 years after the invention of the car, how's the relationship going to change? So I just thought that was an interesting topic. I came up with.
So you invent the car, and next thing you know, cars are driving around.
Well, that's what Google and everybody else and Elon Musk are saying, within 10 years. So do you buy a car? Do you have a car subscription service? You go to work in the morning, the car drives back by itself to pick up your partner and the kids.
Well, I just imagine Amazon deliveries. So what, it's just like the drones, right? Like, what's the truck going to do? If okay, you've got me all the way up till the truck comes out, and then what? It refuses to come in and buzz your number, and it just sits in its van while it claims you weren't home, and you're sitting by the phone. Where is that guy?
That sounds familiar.
Tracking the package.
Yeah. Well, that's it. I think there's applications where it would work, say, perfectly, like, say, Canada Post to, to whatever home it goes into, because it's scanned into the thing. And
I'm sure the union won't have a problem with that.
Well, okay. So, say Purelator or UPS or FedEx, non-unionized workplaces. Okay. So you have a truck that's leaving, say, the California with produce. It has to go to the Toronto Food Terminal. Point A, point B, and it's done by itself. It's going to be a drag for people who are in the trucking industry or in the
I just
construction
imagine
industry,
one of those big rectangular vans pulling up and a big metallic foot kicking the parcel out into the slot.
That sounds like a Warner Brothers cartoon, Looney Tunes. Yeah, I can totally see it in my mind's eye.
But I do fantasize about these mailboxes coming back. Milk chutes coming back. Half of all the houses in Toronto, built before the 50s, they've got the milk chutes. And it's just really interesting.
The milk boxes at the side of the house. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Those are cool, yeah.
Who would have thought we'd come to a time? Like, I actually, I was a kid. And I was like, asking my grandfather, what's this weird door for? And they would tell me these ridiculous stories of, milk being delivered on one of those really super cold mornings, and the top half-inch freezes, and they'd be fighting over that little bit of creamy milk at the top, and the bottles come, and everyone knew the milkman.
Yeah.
And then...
Very cool.
Well, and then...
I remember that, yeah.
My whole life, the idea that we would live in such an affluent time that people would actually come and deliver bread or milk to your door is just... I never understood how that could go away. And so here we are now. The milk chutes won't be big enough for Amazon. So, future houses are going to have this big kind of closet-y thing for all people's packages. That's the way we keep going.
I can see that. Definitely. Well, it'll be interesting because properties are getting smaller and smaller and smaller. These boutique houses, these, small, ridiculously small lots, and the frontage is right up to the... so it'd be interesting to see how they circle that square.
Do you remember an ad? I think it was making fun of another builder. Maybe in the prefab home business, I don't know, but a big builder of houses. And the guy comes out and says, we can make your house for much less money, a lot faster, and with half of the overhead and hidden costs. And he pulls out a model of a house that's about 2 feet wide and goes, the problem is we can only make it this big.
I vaguely recall.
I love that commercial.
I vaguely recall that one. Yeah. That's funny.
I think of that whenever anybody says things are getting, houses are getting smaller. Whatever happened to naming, like they did in the Bush administration, heads of departments czars? That always really bugged me. But notice we don't do that anymore.
Yeah, it's true.
Any connection to the Manafort, Flynn, Cohen?
Yeah, I guess you wouldn't want to have if Trump starts calling people czars, man. Oh well, watch the Alaskan Purchase go get canceled and go back to Russia. I think that week.
So which show are you refusing to do? 31, 24,
I'm not refusing. I'm no, next week.
But we could have a Christmas show where it's very short and just very festive.
Fuck, festive. You're going to bring up Trump. Like, seriously.
All right, well, let me know which of those two you're bailing on. But okay.
I'm bailing on Christmas week. That's
but
it.
That
man.
doesn't mean anything. Is that the 24th or is that the 31st?
That's the week from the 24th, yeah, through the 28th, right? So, I mean, if you want to do, oh fuck. Okay, fine. You want to do? Okay, hold on a second.
You don't want to do
hold
one
on,
2
the
days
15th,
before Christmas.
We're doing.
Or you don't want to do one.
I'm just looking at the calendar. Give me 2 seconds. Okay, fine. You want to do one on the 22nd? We'll do one on the 22nd. That's a full moon that day, too, so that should be interesting.
Okay, that's okay, because we do a best of on New Year's usually.
You want to do one on the 29th?
Hang on. Oh, you don't have to do it. But last year, thanks for listening, on the 31st, it was a best of. And I took audio clips of everybody who had ever been on the show and sewn them together.
Well, there you go. So we'll leave that for you to play with Christmas week. So while you're sitting at home doing lines of whatever.
That's not Christmas week to me. That's New Year's for me.
Okay. Well, when you're doing the best of, that is Saturday, the 29th of
December,
right? Yeah. So that's Okay. So you're putting together the entire 2018, the week of Christmas, to punch out on the 29th.
That's the
if
idea.
I understand what you just said.
On the 31st, but yeah.
For the 31st, yeah. So I guess if you want to do the 15th and the 22nd, fine. But the week of Christmas, yeah. I'm going to disappear like a snowflake.
So I think it's the 10th?
Yeah, my mom's birthday. Happy birthday, Mom.
Find us on Twitter, @thatarcher. Send us an email, archer@twxnet.com. For guest links and contact info, visit our podcast page, tmi.twxnet.com. Find us on Android and Apple podcast apps. Subscribe and rate the show on iTunes.
I'm Dave Archer in Toronto.
And I'm Ian Stolberg in Ottawa.